I was very much interested at that time in a droll little woman. She was married, of course, as I have a horror of unmarried flirts. What enjoyment is there in making love to a woman who belongs to nobody and yet belongs to anyone? And besides, morality aside, I do not understand love as a trade. That disgusts me somewhat. The especial attraction in a married woman to a bachelor is that she gives him a home, a sweet, pleasant home where everyone takes care of you and spoils you, from the husband to the servants. One finds everything combined there, love, friendship, even fatherly interest, bed and board, all, in fact, that constitute the happiness of life, with this incalculable advantage, that one can change one's family from time to time, take up one's abode in all kinds of society in turn. In summer, in the country, with the workman who rents you a home in his house, in winter with the townsfolk, or even with the nobility, if one is ambitious. I have another weakness. It is that I become attached to the husband as well as the wife. I acknowledge even that some husbands, ordinary or coarse as they may be, give me a feeling of disgust for their wives, however charming they may be. But when the husband is intellectual or charming, I invariably become very much attached to him. I am careful if I quarrel with the wife not to quarrel with the husband. In this way I have made some of my best friends, and I have also proved in many cases the incontestable superiority of the male over the female of the human species. The latter makes all sorts of trouble scenes, reproaches, etc., while the former, who has just as good a right to complain, treats you, on the contrary, as though you were a special providence of his hearth. Well, my friend was a quaint little woman, a brunette, fanciful, capricious, pious, superstitious, credulous as a monk, but charming. She had a way of kissing one that I never saw in anyone else, but that was not the attraction. And such a soft skin! It gave me intense delight merely to hold her hands. And an eye. Her glance was like a slow caress, delicious and unending. Sometimes I would lean my head on her knee, and we would remain motionless, she leaning over me with that subtle, enigmatic, disturbing smile that women have, while my eyes would be raised to hers, drinking sweetly and deliciously into my heart, like a form of intoxication, the glance of her limpid blue eyes, limpid as though they were full of thoughts of love, and blue as though they were a heaven of delights. Her husband, inspector of some large public works, was frequently away from home and left us our evenings free. Sometimes I spent them with her lounging on the divan with my forehead on one of her knees, while on the other lay an enormous black cat called Misty, whom she adored. Our fingers would meet on the cat's back and would intertwine in her soft, silky fur. I felt its warm body against my cheek, trembling with its eternal purring, and occasionally a paw would reach out and place on my mouth, or my eyelid, 5 unsheathed claws which would prick my eyelids, and then be immediately withdrawn. Sometimes we would go out on what we called our escapades. They were very innocent, however. They consisted in taking supper at some inn in the suburbs, or else, after dining at her house or at mine, in making the round of the cheap cafes, like students out for a lark. We would go into the common drinking places and take our seats at the end of the smoky den on 2 rickety chairs at an old wooden table. A cloud of pungent smoke, with which blended an odor of fried fish from dinner, filled the room. Men in smocks were talking in loud tones as they drank their petit verre, and the astonished waiter placed before us 2 cherry brandies. She, tremblingly afraid, would raise her double black veil as far as her nose, and then take her glass with the enjoyment that one feels at doing something delightfully naughty. Each cherry she swallowed made her feel as if she had done something wrong. Each swallow of the burning liquor had on her the effect of a delicate and forbidden enjoyment. Then she would say to me in a low tone, "Let us go." And we would leave, she walking quickly with lowered head between the drinkers who watched her going by with a look of displeasure. And as soon as we got into the street she would give a great sigh of relief, as if we had escaped some terrible danger. Sometimes she would ask me with a shudder, "Suppose they should say something rude to me in those places, what would you do?" "Why, I would defend you, parbleu!" I would reply in a resolute manner, and she would squeeze my arm for happiness, perhaps with a vague wish that she might be insulted and protected, that she might see men fight on her account, even those men, with me. One evening as we sat at a table in a tavern at Montmartre, we saw an old woman in tattered garments come in, holding in her hand a pack of dirty cards. Perceiving a lady, the old woman at once approached us and offered to tell my friend's fortune. Emma, who in her heart believed in everything, was trembling with longing and anxiety, and she made a place beside her for the old woman. The latter, old, wrinkled, her eyes with red inflamed rings around them, and her mouth without a single tooth in it, began to deal her dirty cards on the table. She dealt them in piles, then gathered them up, and then dealt them out again, murmuring indistinguishable words. Emma, turning pale, listened with bated breath, gasping with anxiety and curiosity. The fortune-teller broke silence. She predicted vague happenings, happiness in children, a fair young man, a voyage, money, a lawsuit, a dark man, the return of someone, a success, a death. The mention of this death attracted the younger woman's attention. "Whose death?" When? In what manner? The old woman replied, Oh, as to that, these cards are not certain enough. You must come to my place tomorrow. I will tell you about it with coffee grounds, which never make a mistake. Emma turned anxiously to me. Say, let us go there tomorrow. Oh, please say yes. If not, you can't imagine how worried I'll be. I began to laugh. We'll go if you wish it, dearie. The old woman gave us her address. She lived on the 6th floor in a wretched house behind the Butte Chaumont. We went there the following day. Her room, an attic containing 2 chairs and a bed, was filled with strange objects, bunches of herbs hanging from nails, skins of animals, flasks and vials containing liquids of various colors. On the table, a stuffed black cat looked out of eyes of glass. He seemed like the demon of this sinister dwelling. Emma, almost fainting with emotion, sat down on a chair and exclaimed, Oh dear, look at that cat! How like it is to Misty! And she explained to the old woman that she had a cat exactly like that one. The old woman replied gravely, If you are in love with a man, you must not keep it. Emma, suddenly filled with fear, asked, Why not? The old woman sat down familiarly beside her and took her hand. It was the undoing of my life, she said. My friend wanted to hear about it. She leaned against the old woman, questioned her, begged her to tell. At length the woman agreed to do so. I loved that cat, she said, as one would love a brother. I was young then and all alone, a seamstress. I had only him, Mouton. One of the tenants had given it to me. He was as intelligent as a child, and gentle as well, and he worshipped me, my dear lady. He worshipped me more than one does a fetish. All day long he would sit on my lap purring, and all night long on my pillow. I could feel his heart beating, in fact. Well, I happened to make an acquaintance, a fine young man who was working in a white goods house. That went on for about 3 months on a footing of mere friendship. But, you know, one is liable to weaken. It may happen to anyone, and besides, I had really begun to love him. He was so nice and so good. He wanted us to live together for economy's sake. I finally allowed him to come and see me one evening. I had not made up my mind to anything definite, oh no, but I was pleased at the idea that we should spend an hour together. At first he behaved very well, said nice things to me that made my heart go pit-a-pat, and then he kissed me, madame, kissed me as one does when they love. I remained motionless, my eyes closed in a paroxysm of happiness. But suddenly I felt him start violently, and he gave a scream that I shall never forget. I opened my eyes and saw that Mouton had sprung at his face and was tearing the skin with his claws as if it had been a linen rag, and the blood was streaming down like rain, madame. I tried to take the cat away, but he held on tight, scratching all the time, and bit me. He was so crazy. I finally got him and threw him out of the window, which was open, for it was summer. When I began to bathe my poor friend's face, I noticed that his eyes were destroyed, both his eyes. He had to go to the hospital. He died of grief at the end of a year. I wanted to keep him with me and provide for him, but he would not agree to it. One would have supposed that he hated me after the occurrence. As for Mouton, his back was broken by the fall. The janitor picked up his body. I had him stuffed, for in spite of all I was fond of him. If he acted as he did, it was because he loved me, was it not? The old woman was silent and began to stroke the lifeless animal whose body trembled on its iron framework. Emma, with sorrowful heart, had forgotten about the predicted death, or at least she did not allude to it again, and she left, giving the woman 5 francs. As her husband was to return the following day, I did not go to the house for several days. When I did go, I was surprised at not seeing Misty. I asked where he was. She blushed and replied, I gave him away. I was uneasy. I was astonished. Uneasy? Uneasy? About what? She gave me a long kiss and said in a low tone, I was uneasy about your eyes, my dear. End of section 182. Recording by Tatiana Chichilla, Columbus, Ohio. Crazy people attract me. They live in a mysterious land of weird dreams, in that impenetrable cloud of dementia where all that they have witnessed in their previous life, all they have loved, is reproduced for them in an imaginary existence, outside of all laws that govern the things of this life and control human thought. For them there is no such thing as the impossible. Nothing is improbable. Fairyland is a constant quantity and the supernatural quite familiar. The old rampart, logic, the old wall, reason, the old mainstay of thought, good sense, break down, fall and crumble before their imagination, set free and escaped into the limitless realm of fancy, and advancing with fabulous bounds, and nothing can ever check it. For them everything happens, and anything may happen. They make no effort to conquer events, to overcome resistance, to overturn obstacles. By a sudden caprice of their flighty imagination they become princes, emperors, or gods, are possessed of all the wealth of the world, all the delightful things of life, enjoy all pleasures, are always strong, always beautiful, always young, always loved. They alone can be happy in this world. For, as far as they are concerned, reality does not exist. I love to look into their wandering intelligence as one leans over an abyss at the bottom of which seethes a foaming torrent whose source and destination are both unknown. But it is in vain that we lean over these abysses, for we shall never discover the source nor the destination of this water. After all, it is only water, just like what is flowing in the sunlight, and we shall learn nothing by looking at it. It is likewise of no use to ponder over the intelligence of crazy people, for their most weird notions are, in fact, only ideas that are already known, which appear strange simply because they are no longer under the restraint of reason. Their whimsical source surprises us because we do not see it bubbling up. Doubtless the dropping of a little stone into the current was sufficient to cause these ebullitions. Nevertheless, crazy people attract me, and I always return to them, drawn in spite of myself by this trivial mystery of dementia. One day, as I was visiting one of the asylums, the physician who was my guide said, "Come, I will show you an interesting case." And he opened the door of a cell where a woman of about 40, still handsome, was seated in a large armchair, looking persistently at her face in a little hand mirror. As soon as she saw us, she rose to her feet, ran to the other end of the room, picked up a veil that lay on a chair, wrapped it carefully round her face, and then came back, nodding her head in reply to our greeting. "Well," said the doctor, "how are you this morning?" She gave a deep sigh. "Oh, ill, monsieur, very ill. The marks are increasing every day." He replied in a tone of conviction, oh no, I assure you that you are mistaken." She drew near to him and murmured, "No, I am certain of it. I counted 10 pittings this morning, 3 on the right cheek, 4 on the left cheek, and 3 on the forehead. It is frightful, frightful. I shall never dare to let anyone see me, not even my son. No, not even him. I am lost, I am disfigured forever." She fell back in her armchair and began to sob. The doctor took a chair, sat down beside her, and said soothingly in a gentle tone, "Come, let me see. I assure you it is nothing. With a slight cauterization I will make it all disappear." She shook her head in denial, without speaking. He tried to touch her veil, but she seized it with both hands so violently that her fingers went through it. He continued to reason with her and reassure her. "Come, you know very well that I remove those horrid pits every time, and that there is no trace of them after I have treated them. If you do not let me see them, I cannot cure you." "I do not mind your seeing them," she murmured, "but I do not know that gentleman who is with you." "He is a doctor also, who can give you better care than I can." She then allowed her face to be uncovered, but her dread, her emotion, and her shame at being seen brought a rosy flush to her face and her neck, down to the collar of her dress. She cast down her eyes, turned her face aside, first to the right, then to the left, to avoid our gaze, and stammered out, "Oh, it is torture to let myself be seen like this. It is horrible, is it not? Is it not horrible?" I looked at her in much surprise, for there was nothing on her face, not a mark, not a spot, not a sign of one, nor a scar. She turned towards me, her eyes still lowered, and said, "It was while I was taking care of my son that I caught this fearful disease, monsieur. I saved him, but I am disfigured. I sacrificed my beauty to him, to my poor child. However, I did my duty, my conscience is at rest. If I suffer, it is known only to God." The doctor had drawn from his coat pocket a fine watercolor paint-brush. "Let me attend to it," he said. "I will put it all right." She held out her right cheek, and he began by touching it lightly with the brush here and there, as though he were putting little points of paint on it. He did the same with the left cheek, then with the chin and the forehead, and then exclaimed until dinner-time, laden with medicine bottles, and shut herself up at once in her room, where she saturated herself with disinfectants. The priest was waiting for her in the dining-room. As soon as she saw him, she exclaimed in a voice full of emotion, "Well?" "No improvement. The doctor is very anxious." The next day, as soon as it was light, she was sent to inquire for her son, but there was no improvement, and she spent the whole day in her room, where little braziers were giving out pungent odors. Her maid said that you could also hear her sighing all the evening. She spent a whole week in this manner, only going out for an hour or two during the afternoon to breathe the air. She now sent to make inquiries every hour, and would sob when the reports were unfavorable. On the morning of the 11th day, the priest, having been announced, entered her room, his face grave and pale, and said, without taking the chair she offered him, "Madame, your son is very ill and wishes to see you." She fell on her knees, exclaiming, "Oh my God! Oh my God! I would never dare! My God! Help me!" The priest continued, "The doctor holds out little hope, madame, and George is expecting you." And he left the room. 2 hours later, as the young lad, feeling himself dying, again asked for his mother, the abbé went to her again and found her still on her knees, weeping and repeating, I will not, I am much too afraid, I will not." He tried to persuade her, to strengthen her, to lead her. He only succeeded in bringing on an attack of nerves that lasted some time and caused her to shriek. The doctor, when he came in the evening, was told of this cowardice, and declared that he would bring her in himself, of her own volition or by force. But after trying all manner of argument, and just as he seized her round the waist to carry her into her son's room, she caught hold of the door and clung to it so firmly that they could not drag her away. Then when they let go of her, she fell at the feet of the doctor, begging his forgiveness and acknowledging that she was a wretched creature. And then she exclaimed, "Oh, he's not going to die. Tell me that he is not going to die, I beg of you. Tell him that I love him and that I worship him." The young lad was dying. Feeling that he had only a few moments to live, he entreated that his mother be persuaded to come and bid him a last farewell. With that sort of presentiment that the dying sometimes have, he had understood, had guessed all, and he said, "If she is afraid to come into the room, beg her just to come to the balcony as far as my window, so that I may see her, so that I may take a farewell look at her, as I cannot kiss her." The doctor and the abbé, once more, went together to this woman and assured her, "You will run no risk, for there will be a pane of glass between you and him." She consented, covered up her head, and took with her a bottle of smelling salts. She took 3 steps on the balcony, then, all at once, hiding her face in her hands, she moaned, "No, no, I would never dare look at him, never. I am too much ashamed, too much afraid. No, I cannot." They endeavored to drag her along, but she held on with both hands to the railings and uttered such plaints that the passers-by in the street raised their heads. And the dying boy waited, his eyes turned toward that window, waited to die until he could see for the last time that sweet, beloved face, the worshipped face of his mother. He waited long, and night came on. Then he turned over with his face to the wall and was silent. When day broke, he was dead. The day following, she was crazy. End of section 183. Recording by Tatiana Chichilla, Columbus, Ohio. The Seine flowed past my house without a ripple on its surface, and gleaming in the bright morning sunlight. It was a beautiful, broad, indolent silver stream, with crimson lights here and there, and on the opposite side of the river were rows of tall trees that covered all the bank with an immense wall of verdure. The sensation of life which is renewed each day, of fresh, happy, loving life trembled in the leaves, palpitated in the air, was mirrored in the water. The postman had just brought my papers, which were handed to me, and I walked slowly to the river bank in order to read them. In the first paper I opened, I noticed this headline, "Statistics of Suicides," and I read that more than 8,500 persons had killed themselves in that year. In a moment I seemed to see them. I saw this voluntary and hideous massacre of the despairing who were weary of life. I saw men bleeding, their jaws fractured, their skulls cloven, their breasts pierced by a bullet, slowly dying, alone in a little room in a hotel, giving no thought to their wound, but thinking only of their misfortunes. I saw others seated before a tumbler in which some matches were soaking, or before a little bottle with a red label. They would look at it fixedly without moving, then they would drink and await the result, then a spasm would convulse their cheeks and draw their lips together. Their eyes would grow wild with terror, for they did not know that the end would be preceded by so much suffering. They rose to their feet, paused, fell over, and with their hands pressed to their stomachs they felt their internal organs on fire, their entrails devoured by the fiery liquid, before their minds began to grow dim. I saw others hanging from a nail in the wall, from the fastening of the window, from a hook in the ceiling, from a beam in the garret, from a branch of a tree amid the evening rain, and I surmised all that had happened before they hung there motionless, their tongues hanging out of their mouths. I imagined the anguish of their heart, their final hesitation, their attempts to fasten the rope, to determine that it was secure, to then to pass a noose around their neck and let themselves fall. I saw others lying on wretched beds, mothers with their little children, old men dying of hunger, young girls dying for love, all rigid, suffocated, asphyxiated, while in the center of the room the brazier still gave forth the fumes of charcoal. And I saw others walking at night along the deserted bridges. These were the most sinister. The water flowed under the arches with a low sound. They did not see it. They guessed at it from its cool breath. They longed for it and they feared it. They dared not do it, and yet they must. A distant clock sounded the hour, and suddenly, in the vast silence of the night, there was heard the splash of a body falling into the river, a scream or two, the sound of hands beating the water, and all was still. Sometimes, even, there was only the sound of the falling body when they had tied their arms down or fastened a stone to their feet. Oh, the poor things! The poor things! How I felt their anguish! How I died in their death! I went through all their wretchedness. I endured in 1 hour all their tortures. I knew all the sorrows that had led them to this, for I know the deceitful infamy of life, and no one has felt it more than I have. How I understood them, these who, weak, harassed by misfortune, having lost those they loved, awakened from the dream of a tardy compensation, from the illusion of another existence where God will finally be just, after having been ferocious, and their minds disabused of the mirages of happiness, have given up the fight and desire to put an end to this ceaseless tragedy or this shameful comedy. Suicide. Why, it is the strength of those whose strength is exhausted, the hope of those who no longer believe, the sublime courage of the conquered. Yes, there is at least one door in this life we can always open and pass through to the other side. Nature had an impulse of pity. She did not shut us up in prison. Mercy for the despairing. As for those who are simply disillusioned, let them march ahead with free soul and quiet heart. They have nothing to fear, since they may take their leave, for behind them there is always this door that the gods of our illusions cannot even lock. I thought of this crowd of suicides, more than 8,500 in 1 year, and it seemed to me that they had combined to send to the world a prayer, to utter a cry of appeal, to demand something that should come into effect later when we all understood things better. It seemed to me that all these victims, their throats cut, poisoned, hung, asphyxiated, drowned, all came together, a frightful horde, like citizens to the polls, to say to society, "Grant us at least a gentle death. Help us to die, you who will not help us to live. See, we are numerous. We have the right to speak in these days of freedom, of philosophic independence, and of popular suffrage. Give to those who renounce life the charity of a death that will not be repugnant nor terrible." I began to dream, allowing my fancy to roam at will in weird and mysterious fashion on this subject. I seemed to be all at once in a beautiful city. It was Paris, but at what period? I walked about the streets, looking at the houses, the theaters, the public buildings, and presently found myself in a square where I remarked at a large building, very handsome, dainty, and attractive. I was surprised on reading on the facade the inscription of letters in gold, "Suicide Bureau." Oh, the weirdness of waking dreams, where the spirit soars into a world of unrealities and possibilities. Nothing astonishes one, nothing shocks one, and the unbridled fancy makes no distinction between the comic and the tragic. I approached the building where footmen in knee breeches were seated in the vestibule in front of a cloak-room, as they do at the entrance of a club. I entered out of curiosity. One of the men rose and said, "What does monsieur wish?" "I wish to know what building this is." "Nothing more?" "Why, no." "Then would monsieur like me to take him to the secretary of the bureau?" I hesitated and asked, "But will that not disturb him?" "Oh, no, monsieur, he is here to receive those who desire information." "Well, lead the way." He took me through corridors where old gentlemen were chatting, and finally led me into a beautiful office, somewhat somber, furnished throughout in black wood. A stout young man with a corporation was writing a letter as he smoked a cigar, the fragrance of which gave evidence of its quality. He rose. We bowed to each other, and as soon as the footman had retired, he asked, "What can I do for you?" "Monsieur," I replied, "pardon my curiosity. I had never seen this establishment. The few words inscribed on the facade filled me with astonishment, and I wanted to know what was going on here." He smiled before replying, then said in a low tone with a complacent air, "Mon Dieu, monsieur, we put to death in a cleanly and gentle, I do not venture to say agreeable manner, those persons who desire to die." I did not feel very shocked, for it really seemed to me natural and right. What particularly surprised me was that on this planet, with its low utilitarian, humanitarian ideals, selfish and coercive of all true freedom, anyone should venture on a similar enterprise, worthy of an emancipated humanity. "How did you get the idea?" I asked. "Monsieur," he replied, "the number of suicides increased so enormously during the 5 years succeeding the World Exposition of 1889 that some measures were urgently needed. People killed themselves in the streets, at fêtes, in restaurants, at the theatre, in railway carriages, at the receptions held by the President of the Republic, everywhere. It was not only a horrid sight for those who love life, as I do, but also a bad example for children. Hence it became necessary to centralize suicides." "What caused this suicide epidemic?" "I do not know. The fact is, I believe, the world is growing old. People begin to see things clearly, and they are getting disgruntled. It is the same today with destiny as with the government. We have found out what it is. People find that they are swindled in every direction, and they just get out of it all. When one discovers that Providence lies, cheats, robs, deceives human beings, just as a plain deputy deceives his constituents, one gets angry. And as one cannot nominate a fresh Providence every 3 months, as we do with our privileged representatives, one just gets out of the whole thing, which is decidedly bad." "Really?" "Oh, as for me, I'm not complaining." "Will you inform me how you carry on this establishment?" "With pleasure. You may become a member when you please. It is a club." "A club?" "Yes, monsieur, founded by the most eminent men in the country, by men of the highest intellect and brightest intelligence. And," he added, laughing heartily, I swear to you that everyone gets a great deal of enjoyment out of it. In this place? Yes, in this place. You surprise me. Mon Dieu, they may enjoy themselves because they have not that fear of death which is the great killjoy of all our earthly pleasures. But why should they be members of this club if they do not kill themselves? One may be a member of the club without being obliged for that reason to commit suicide. But then? I will explain. In view of the enormous increase in suicides and of the hideous spectacle they presented, a purely benevolent society was formed for the protection of those in despair, which placed at their disposal the facilities for a peaceful, painless, if not unforeseen death. Who could have authorized such an institution? General Boulanger, during his brief tenure of power. He could never refuse anything. However, that was the only good thing he did. Hence, a society was formed of clear-sighted, disillusioned skeptics who desired to erect in the heart of Paris a kind of temple dedicated to the contempt for death. This place was formerly a dreaded spot that no one ventured to approach. Then its founders, who met together here, gave a grand inaugural entertainment with Madame Sarah Bernhardt, Judic, Viau, Granier, and 20 others, and Madame de Resque, Coquelin, Maunsoulis, Paulus, etc., present, followed by concerts, the comedies of Dumas, of Mirac, Halévy, and Sardon. We had only one thing to mar it, one drama by Beck which seemed sad, but which subsequently had great success at the Comédie Française. In fact, all Paris came. The enterprise was launched. In the midst of the festivities, what a funereal joke! Not at all. Death need not be sad, it should be a matter of indifference. We made death cheerful, crowned it with flowers, covered it with perfume, made it easy. One learns to aid others through example. One can see that it is nothing. I can well understand that they should come to the entertainments, but did they come to death? Not at first. They were afraid. And later? They came. Many of them. In crowds. We have had more than 40 in a day. One finds hardly any more drowned bodies in the Seine. Who was the first? A club member. As a sacrifice to the cause? I don't think so. A man who was sick of everything, a down-and-out who had lost heavily at baccarat for 3 months. Indeed. The second was an Englishman, an eccentric. We then advertised in the papers, we gave an account of our methods, we invented some attractive instances, but the great impetus was given by poor people. How do you go to work? Would you like to see? I can explain at the same time. Yes, indeed. He took his hat, opened the door, allowed me to precede him, and we entered a card-room where men sat playing, as they play in all gambling places. They were chatting cheerfully, eagerly. I have seldom seen such a jolly, lively, mirthful club. As I seemed surprised, the secretary said, "Oh, the establishment has an unheard-of prestige. All the smart people all over the world belong to it, so as to appear as though they held death in scorn. Then, once they get here, they feel obliged to be cheerful, so that they may not appear to be afraid. So they joke and laugh and talk flippantly. They are witty, and they become so. At present it is certainly the most frequented and the most entertaining place in Paris. The women are even thinking of building an annex for themselves." And in spite of all this, you have how many suicides in the house? As I said, about 40 or 50 a day. Society people are rare, but poor devils abound. The middle class has also a large contingent. And how do they do? They are asphyxiated, very slowly. In what manner? A gas of our own invention. We have the patent. On the other side of the building are public entrances, 3 little doors opening on small streets. When a man or woman present themselves, they are interrogated. Then they are offered assurance, aid, and protection. If a client accepts, inquiries are made, and sometimes we have saved their lives. Where do you get your money? Oh, we have a great deal. There are a large number of shareholders. Besides, it is fashionable to contribute to the establishment. The names of the donors are published in Figaro. Then the suicide of every rich man costs 1,000 francs, and they look as if they are lying in state. It costs the poor nothing. How can you tell who is poor? Oh, monsieur, we can guess. And besides, they must bring a certificate of indigency from the commissary of police of their district. If you knew how distressing it is to see them come in. I visited their part of our building once only, and I will never go again. The place itself is almost as good as this part, almost as luxurious and comfortable, but they themselves, if you could see them arriving, the old men in rags coming to die, persons who have been dying of misery for months, picking up their food at the edges of the curbstone like dogs in the street, women in rags, sick, paralyzed, incapable of making a living, who say to us after they have told us their story, "You see that things cannot go on like that, as I cannot work any longer or learn anything. I saw one woman of 87 who had lost all her children and grandchildren, and who for the last 6 weeks had been sleeping out of doors. It made me ill to hear of it. Then we have so many different cases, without counting those who say nothing, but simply ask, "Where is it?" These are admitted at once, and it is all over in a minute. With a pang at my heart, I repeated, "And where is it?" "Here," and he opened a door, adding, "Go in. This is the part specifically reserved for club members, and the one least used. We have so far only had 11 annihilations in here." "Ah, you call that an annihilation?" "Yes, monsieur, go in." I hesitated. At length I went in. It was a wide corridor, a sort of greenhouse in which panes of glass of pale blue, tender pink, and delicate green gave the poetic charm of landscapes to the enclosing walls. In this pretty salon there were divans, magnificent palms, flowers, especially roses of balmy fragrance, books on the tables, the Revue de Deux Mondes, cigars in government boxes, and, what surprised me, Vichy pastilles and bonbonnières. As I expressed my surprise, my guide said, "Oh, they come often here to chat," he continued. "The public corridors are similar, but more simply furnished." In reply to a question of mine, he pointed to a couch covered with creamy crêpe de chine with white embroidery, beneath a large shrub of unknown variety, at the foot of which was a circular bed of mignonette. The secretary added in a lower tone, "We change the flower and the perfume at will, for our gas, which is quite imperceptible, gives death the fragrance of the suicide's favorite flower. It is volatilized with essences. Would you like to inhale it for a second?" "No, thank you," I said hastily. "Not yet." He began to laugh. "Oh, monsieur, there is no danger. I have tried it myself several times." I was afraid he would think me a coward, and I said, "Well, I'll try it." "Stretch yourself out on the undormeuse." A little uneasy, I seated myself on the low couch covered in crêpe de chine, and stretched myself full length, and was at once bathed in the delicious odor of mignonette. I opened my mouth in order to breathe it in, for my mind had already become stupefied and forgetful of the past, and was a prey, in the first stages of asphyxia, to the enchanting intoxication of a destroying and magic opium. Someone shook me by the arm. Oh, monsieur," said the secretary, laughing, "it looks to me as if you were almost caught." But a voice, a real voice, and no longer a dream voice, greeted me with a pleasant intonation. "Good morning, monsieur. How goes it?" My dream was over. I saw the Seine distinctly in the sunlight, and, coming along the path, the garde champêtre of the district, who with his right hand touched his képi braided in silver. I replied, "Good morning, Marinelle. Where are you going?" "I am going to look at a drowned man whom they fished up near the Morlon, another who has thrown himself into the soup. He even took off his trousers in order to tie his legs together with them." End of section 184. Recording by Tatiana Chichilla, Columbus, Ohio. End of complete original short stories of Guy de Maupassant. Translated by Albert M.C. McMaster, A.E. Henderson, and Luis Quesada.